Hey everyone, thank you for taking the time to check out this video. Most of you guys know me, but if you're sharing the video with extended family or some friends, my name is Adam Bartling. I am 35 years old at the time of this recording. I live with my beautiful wife, Andrea, and my two sons, Carter, who is 2.5, and Salem, who is just over 3 months old. And we live in Kansas City, Missouri right now. My brother is Jason Bartling, and my parents are Mark and Rita, and all three of them live in Lodgepole, Nebraska. I was born in Sidney, Nebraska, January 17th, 1986, and I attended school, elementary and high school in Lodgepole, and I graduated in 2004 from Lodgepole High, and I was in a class of under 20 people, and we were actually the last class to graduate from Lodgepole before the consolidation with the neighboring town of Chapel in 2005, which became Creek Valley High School. So just a quick little introduction. I've wanted to record a little interview with my elders. So in this case, my grandpa, who lives out north of Lodgepole. I have so many memories of the farm where he and my grandma and all my aunts and uncles and my cousins and friends of cousins and other friends of the family, just over the years, so many different memories that are just implanted in my mind. And I just think it's so interesting to learn a little bit about why the farm is there, or kind of why my grandfather made the choices he made, and his outlook on life, and how he passed that down to his kids, the 7 kids that they had out there, and how those kids are going to pass that on to us, and I'm going to pass it on to the generation below me, my kids, and then et cetera, et cetera. I think it's really interesting as I get older, just thinking about the family and all the ancestry and all the different things that built this family, and where we come from, and what makes us who we are. So that's the whole kind of idea and concept behind this whole video here. And I had the plan to record with my grandpa, but I had so many different ideas than what actually happened. So it was kind of a miracle that we even made the recording happen in the first place, but we did it. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time introducing the thing. I want to get into it, but it is such an interesting story. I have to just share it. I'm going to tell the story as it's in present tense, just so you kind of get an idea of what we went through to make this happen and why it's so weird. We're sitting outside on a porch with masks on, and we're talking like far apart from each other. Well, that is because it is 2020, the end of 2020 when we conducted the interview. It's Christmas 2020. Andrea and I and the kids traveled to Loveland to spend Christmas there with her parents, and then the plan is to spend the following week in Lodgepole with my parents, and then do the traditional Christmas Eve celebration at the farm, and hopefully get some quality time with my grandpa. And my plan was to spend a day out there with him while we were out there and conduct the interview, and just get to know him a little bit, and just talk to him throughout the whole day was my plan. But because of the coronavirus that was going on, the more unfortunate news that we got in the year 2020 is my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it turns out that she is scheduled for a double mastectomy the 14th of December or some day like that. I can't remember exactly. And so the doctor is advising that we absolutely no visitors, so she can't have anyone at the house. So we find this out a couple days before we're bags are already packed and we're ready to go. So we have to change plans, but it was an easy change of plans. We just had to stay longer in Loveland, but I really still wanted to get this interview with my grandpa, so I decided that I was going to just stay in Loveland, but I was going to take a day trip and drive out to the farm and sit down with him for the day like I had already planned, and do the interview. So that was the plan. So December 19th comes along. This is again, Christmas time 2020. I have all the equipment I need to take it out there. I've made the trip, and I'm ready to go. Grandpa's on board, and my dad's gonna come, and he's gonna help out, and we're gonna stay distance because my dad, because of my mom's surgery, is not supposed to be leaving the house or seeing anyone else either, because we don't want to be bringing coronavirus in and exposing my mom to the virus. So I'm traveling. I leave Loveland, Colorado. It's about a 3-hour drive to the farm from there. So I get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and pack up, and I'm heading out there. I get about halfway there. I'm stopped at a rest stop in Wyoming, and my dad calls me and says, "Hey, Grandpa is not feeling well," and he was around some people who tested positive for coronavirus. He's got a sore throat. I don't know if we're going to be able to do the interview. So I'm thinking, dang it, we have to figure out a way to still do this interview. So, but if we don't, at least I'll get to go see my mom through the window and say hello and drop off some Christmas presents. So anyway, hang up the phone with my dad and then drive a little bit farther. And then I think, man, I really want to get this thing recorded. So let's figure out a way that we can do this so that we don't have to be around like in close contact with my grandpa, but we can still capture it and still ask him some questions. So we're brainstorming all this equipment that we can set up and all that. And we were going to set it up and run a microphone through the kitchen window and have him talk to us and set up a camera in there and stuff, and then put it together later. And then we finally decide, okay, why don't we just sit outside? Let's just sit outside and do the interview. And Valerie and Rich were actually at the farm that day. So Val had been taking care of Grandpa, and she agreed to help us get him outside and everything. So we went out to the farm. I had my dad come with me, and that's what you're going to see in the video. And we find a spot, but it's super windy that day too. So we're faced with the challenge of trying to get it out of the wind so we don't have wind coming through these microphones or whatever, so we could really hear everything that we wanted to capture. And so we set up out there on the back porch, and that's why it is the way it is. And we're wearing the mask. Oh, Grandpa is sick, so we're all kind of paranoid that he has coronavirus. We can't be getting it from him and whatever. And to throw even more of a curveball in the story, it turns out I actually had the coronavirus, and I just did not have symptoms yet. I later on, once I got back to Loveland after this trip, I tested positive, and the 19th, the day of this interview, was my first day of actually having symptoms. I woke up that morning actually feeling a little bit off. So it's just a crazy story, but I think that it was just important to tell that so that you kind of understand what we went through to make it happen. But I am so grateful, so grateful that we did capture what we did get captured, and got to hear some of the stories from Grandpa. And at the end of the video, I was able to reach out to all 7 kids via Zoom. Thank you to technology, and everyone participated, and I can't thank you enough for being a part of that, because I really think this is going to be one of those things where we're always going to have this, and we can always look back on this, or when my kids get older or their kids get older, maybe they'll have the opportunity to go back and just kind of learn who everybody in the past and their past was and is. So that's what it is now. And lastly, I want to say, I have so many memories. I can't stress enough how many memories I have at the farm, and a lot of it has molded me into who I am today. Like seeing a lot of the work ethic that was going on out there, which you'll hear Grandpa talk about, and just all of the fun we had. I mean, there was a lot of fun out there. I mean, there's so many stories. I remember having go-karts out there with my cousins, and my grandma being so nervous about it, and just all the different things like that, and walking out to the hill, and just how open the space is, and all of that stuff. So I could go on forever. I really could, but we gotta get me off here. This isn't about me. I'm just ranting. But one thing I wanted to say is when my grandma got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was quite a shock to all of us, and I saw a lot of struggles that you know, really make me sad to this day, because seeing her like that was never anything that I remember her like being ever. She was always sharp and on point with everything. And what I think is really, really adorable, and part of the reason that I admire Grandma and Grandpa so much, is that they, there was just always such a true bond, and I never really saw them not getting along, and I loved how close-knit everything seemed out there. And anyway, when she had Alzheimer's and everyone was struggling so much, and she didn't know my grandpa that well, and he reached out to me about setting up a time where some people from his church, there were a couple women that he knew from the church who played the piano and the organ, who played the hymns, and they came over to my house when I lived in Sydney, and I had my little recording studio set up there, and they recorded some hymns in a night. And here's a picture of them sitting in that studio with the pastor, and I can't remember who all was there, but anyway, they recorded all these hymns that night, and Grandpa wanted those so that he could play them for Grandma, and they could kind of remember where they came from. I know the church scene, you know, going to church and being religious and their faith was one thing that really kept them together. And so when I was thinking of some music to add to this video, couldn't think of anything really, and then it dawned on me I still have all these recordings from that evening. So the hymns that you hear in the background of this video are from that night, and what a wonderful memory of Grandma and Grandpa and those people being from the church with me. Such a great positive environment, and just so much love. So that's it for me. I've talked too long anyway, but let's head out to the farm. Let's take Road 149 out to Grandpa and Grandma's house, to the farm, and let's talk with Grandpa Bartling. Good morning. We are here at the farm north of Lodgepole, Nebraska, which is about 5 miles north of Lodgepole. And I'm here with an idol of mine who I've been wanting to interview and ask questions for a long time. And I just recently kind of decided that it'd be nice to get it on recording so we could always hear the stories that you have to tell. And Marvin Bartling, my grandpa, is here, and he's taken time out of his day, and he's sitting out here in the wind. We found a nice spot out here in the middle of the country to have a little interview. And I'm here with my dad, Mark, who's next to me here, and we're gonna just ask you some questions and learn a little bit about you and have it on file so we can always know you. So, and get to know you a little more than I probably do already. So I want to start with your childhood. I want to talk about, you know, when you were born, the circumstances around when you were born, and the location, and anything you remember about that.
Good morning, Adam. I'm not much for interviews, but I am honored to be interviewed by my grandson. I was born in 1934 in Dual County during a dust storm, one of the 1934 dust storms. When I was ready to be born, my father took me to chapel in a 1929 Chevrolet, and the dust did blow. And every few miles, the car would stop, and he would have to open the hood and open his Prince Albert can and get some gasoline and wash out the ignition points. After several times doing that, we made it to chapel okay. My Aunt Gertie Charles suggested a name, Marvin Dean, and it stuck.
And how many siblings? Let's talk next about your parents and kind of their occupation.
I have 4 siblings: Doris, Gary, Vernon, and Bud.
And Gary is still with us today, correct?
Yeah, Gary's still with us. And Doris.
And Doris. And just put a timestamp on this interview. It's December the 19th, I believe. December 19th, 2020. and we are currently in the middle of a pandemic, the coronavirus. So that's going to be history as well. So you talked about your dad with the car and everything. Can we talk a little bit about your parents and what they did?
My parents were long-time farmers raised in the country. Maybe we call them sharecroppers. And originally was their parents are from Germany. And my background was of course German too. So when we had Second World War, the kids in school called me Hitler. And that was not fun. I started school in Goodview Consolidated, which is a consolidated school of 3 counties, and is in Dual County. I remember the blizzard of 1949. I remember it well because I didn't have to go to school for a whole week. I also remember World War II as being so impressive how patriotic people were. People collected things for the war front. The women, they had special things that they'd done. The kids in school even collected soap weeds. That fuzzy top on soap weeds, and we sent it in and they made parachutes out of it. And the people the young men in before the young men in the war, if they did not appreciate the draft, their cars were painted with yellow stripes. I met my wife Ruth. I don't know. She was just always around, so I can't say. I was age 20, and she was. She was 20 and I was 21.
So you knew her your whole life?
What?
Did you know her your whole life?
Yes. Yeah.
Grew up knowing.
I practically did. Probably with the rival school with the sports, we kind of knew each other.
Did you join the Marines after marriage or before?
I joined the Marines in February 1956. And I served there for 2 years. I was discharged in February 28th, or 1958. I joined the Marines because it was the shortest term when I could get out. My intention was to get in and get out. I had a lot of friendships in the Marine Corps. My special one was probably a young man, Italian man by the name of Herenik, and he was an Italian, and we were really good friends. I was not deployed out of the United States. I spent most of my time in California, but went out on a lot of ocean trips.
Can you talk a little bit about your training in the Marines, what that was like? Was that pretty hard?
My training was traditional Marine Corps training. We had a pretty tough boot camp, and then we had a lot of hand-to-hand combat training and all the things that were used in war to kill that I wasn't really too excited about, but I never had to do it.
So you were lucky you never had to...
I was lucky I never had to do it, no.
What country, this is off the chart, but it just kind of brings up a topic I was curious about. What countries in your life have you visited?
Oh.
I know Canada, for sure.
Canada and Mexico, probably all. And farm life was very traditional. We had the cows, the chickens, and the garden, big garden, and my mom and dad and my brothers and sisters all worked in the garden. And the economy has changed radically in Lodgepole because we had 5 filling stations and 3 grocery stores and oh gosh, a radiator shop and a heating shop, and there was a lot of business in Lodgepole, but there's not anything left anymore.
Yeah, it's sure kind of dried up in Lodgepole at the time the internet came along.
Dried up, but it's still home. My religion means a lot to me right now, and my mom and dad took me to Sunday school and church, and it was kind of meaningless until one day when we were having a youth group, and I met the Lord through the pastor Schrader, and that love has never gone away. That love carried me through high school and through college and through my teaching career.
Do you have a favorite Bible verse?
I do have a favorite Bible verse. It would probably be Psalm 121, and it was a psalm that my mother was recited when she was confirmed. My favorite meals is good old country meals. You can't beat fried chicken, fried potatoes, and gravy. Music, I like country and western, and mostly bluegrass.
Bluegrass. I remember hearing those radio stations in your shop growing up.
Can we back up just a minute here and let's talk about the farm? As far as I know that the house was moved from Gurley. It was built in Gurley originally, and it was moved from Gurley, which is, how far is that, like 25 miles to Gurley? How was this house moved, and what year was that, and how long did it take to get it here?
House was moved in 1938, and the foundation and the basement had already been finished and poured, and the basement was dug with a team of mules and a slip. A slip is kind of a wheelbarrow without wheel on it, and the mules would go down in the hole and drag out a bucket full of dirt. The foundation and the steps was already poured, and they moved the house. It was jacked up on big steel dollies, and it was pulled by an old Caterpillar tractor. And there was a lot of glitches, the mailboxes and the telephone lines, and it took a lot of days to move the house here because of all the glitches we had to go through. And it was prepared well enough that they could pull it right up on the foundation of the basement.
And as far as the outbuildings go, I think that you and your dad, which would be my grandpa Richard, salvaged some old granaries and reused the lumber to build your body shop.
That is correct. And when shortly after we moved here, when Sioux Villa and the area was in progress during World War II, my dad went up and got about a couple loads of scrap lumber that were actually forms for the igloos, and he built those buildings from that lumber.
That's very interesting to think about them moving a house with the equipment they had at that time.
Yeah.
And it's been here.
Middle of the road,
Yeah.
all the way from Gurley. Yep.
Family traditions are. We always were a teasing family, and we liked to have fun with everything. But then, when it really counted, we were pretty close. And when we needed each other, we was always there. Some other favorite memories that I might recall, I don't know why, but when I was in the 4th grade at the Goodview School, I got caught smoking cigarettes behind the school. I had to write, "I will not smoke again," I think, a lot of times.
4th grade, so that puts you at, what, 10 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So then, when you were going to Goodview, you were obviously a gorilla, but so what happened later on was your brother Vernon actually married your school teacher. Is that right?
My brother Vernon
Uh-huh.
married a school teacher, yeah.
And that was Shirley? Really? I didn't even see. These are the things I was hoping to hear. I didn't know these things.
Yep. So that's why I tell people I didn't learn a darn thing from my 7th grade school teacher. And when he came home and was showing my sister Doris the ring, I cried.
So if you could give the younger generation some advice, like Adams Boys, Carter and Salem, my grandkids, what kind of advice would you give them now in this times we're living in?
I would say to them that everybody's got to work, and that everybody needs to earn their pay, and everyone should be honest and transparent. And when you marry for love and not for lust. And you love the Lord in every situation.
I love that. It's good.
Advice.
Yeah, very good advice. That's all we have on the list, right? I think we've touched everything we wrote down. I was hoping at the end or at any time we could just, unless you're getting sick of this, which is fine too, if you have anything else you want to talk about. I know you talked about the blizzard. My wife Andrea's parents were saying you were telling them a story about some topics about the blizzard, and they thought that was really interesting. And it was 1949, right? We tried to find out. You missed school for a week, but it said it was the largest blizzard in like American or in Nebraska history. I can't even imagine.
We climbed on the snowbanks and we made fun for ourselves. We had our sleds and we'd watch the big maintainers that were opening the roads, and they would go full throttle and they'd hit the snowbank, and then the snow would fly, and then they'd back up and they'd hit it again and hit it again. And the one right here by our house, it took them an hour to get through that one snowbank. There was a ranch, a big ranch in Texas. I don't recall the name, it don't matter, but they had thousands of sheep out here on the wheat fields with sheep herders. And each group was 1,000 sheep, and they had a dog and a sheep herder and a little shack. And when that snow came in, it covered up everything. And airplanes came in and rescued the sheep herders. I don't know about the dogs, but they rescued the sheep herders, and the rest of the sheep were just spread everywhere. There was dead sheep in the ditches and all over. And we had sheep in all of our buildings, so that they just wandered in the snowstorm and got where they had some shelter. That's the sheep story.
That's the sheep story. That's
Yeah.
It takes me a minute because I'm imagining these things in real life, just thinking of how crazy. I can't imagine that much snow. And
So I'm thinking about your parents, Richard and Tilly Bartling. Obviously my grandparents. I know that Grandpa loved to fish, and we went fishing a lot with Grandpa. And Grandma had a knack for gardening and canning, and as well as my mother. But I remember the days when Grandma and Grandpa would come out here and we'd pick beans forever and snap beans and do, I don't remember, but probably 30, 40 quarts of beans in one day.
80.
80 quarts.
80 quarts.
Wow, okay. But what would you say was your most valuable lesson from your parents?
Probably to love the Lord. And also a work ethic and honesty and clarity and transparency and
I'll say when it comes to both of those things, especially with what I can see with the work ethic, there's always work going on out here, and you're always kind of a mastermind at fixing stuff from stuff you had laying around. It just seems like you were a jack of all trades and just always working.
There was always resources of some kind.
Yeah.
The biggest resource was kids.
Yeah.
And when we had work to do, the kids knew it and they did it.
That's also carried on generations down, I would say. Definitely. It's been taught.
We talked about Faye. Probably not.
Might
have talked about supper.
So many years of farming and in the auto body, had your own shop. You eventually spent 25 years teaching at WNCC auto body. 26. Okay. But there was always a wheat crop. That was on top of your other job. And I remember years where there was a good harvest, and I remember years where there was a hailstorm. And just buckle up the boots and keep going. When the hail destroyed the crop, I guess we thought that that's what the Lord wanted to happen. So we just kept going. So I'm sure you remember some good crops and some bad ones, and droughts and hail and wind and.
That all went with farm living. And I'm so thankful now for the space that I have, or the space where I live, where I'm in a rural community and not boxed in. And if I'm able, I can walk to the mailbox or walk to the barn, chase the dog, and I really enjoy the space.
I tell you, when you go somewhere else, like even just live in Colorado or in Kansas City, where you're just surrounded by, you can't see any, it's just houses and houses and houses. You come somewhere like this, it's just amazing that you get to see this every day. You really appreciate it when you leave, that's for sure. You come back and it's an amazing place.
Did you ever raise any chickens?
I was just going to ask about that.
I guess maybe that'd be a family tradition, would be chickens.
Dressing chickens.
I couldn't count the amount of chickens that this family dressed, but it would be way up in the thousands, because we always raised 2 batches of 200 for years, and then we'd dress chickens for a lot of the neighbors too. And we should have had a picture, because it was just like a team. Everybody had a job, and Mark and Bobby, they caught him, and Matt, he scalded him and picked him, and I don't know who all had it, don't remember, but I know I picked him, and Mom washed him, and Mom took the entrails out, and then The girls washed them, but it was a big operation for a lot of years.
I remember that. It sure looked like an assembly line. I remember being part of it.
It was an assembly line.
Piles and piles of feathers, that's for sure.
I think the worst part was the chopping their heads off. I hated watching that part, but the chickens were good. It was worth it.
And guess what we'd have for dinner?
Chicken soup, chicken.
Fried chicken.
Yeah.
I like my mother's old fashioned black cast iron skillet, piled with sliced potatoes and a tin lid on the top of it, and lots of grease. Salt and pepper, that was really good.
That sounds delicious.
Cooked in lard, probably.
Oh yeah, lard, absolutely.
What else? Anything else you can think of, really? I mean, I remember the Christmas, when I thought of traditions, I remember the Christmas tradition that 7 kids and then how many grandkids? There's probably some cousins I don't even really, I wish I knew better that I don't know, but you think about that growing up. I remember this place being jam-packed and people would bring in those, all the kids would bring in Christmas tray or candy trays and soups, and we did pizza for a while, and
yeah, and there was 32 people.
Yeah, that was a blast. And we'd play football or something out here in the driveway with the kids, and I'll never forget those times, that's for sure.
I lived a good life, and I'm so blessed with so many things, and I made mistakes, and everyone forgive me. And right now, at Christmas time, I'm thankful more than ever.
It was really, really good to have the opportunity to see you and visit you, that's for sure. Sorry we have to sit outside with masks on, but that's what this year is. But do you have anything you want to talk about? Anything else? Your auto body career, your painting. I know you always painted tractors. You're always painting a tractor for someone out here. I remember that. Or a truck or something. Did that for a long time.
Well, other than the farm, I always had a body shop. I had my own body shop for 8 years, and then I went to Votech and taught there for 26 years. And all I can say is that I had a good life, and I thank the Lord.
I would like to say that you've touched everyone around you too, and I'm glad I couldn't ask for a better family. So you've definitely inspired a lot of us. So I'm just grateful for that. Do you have anything else that you can think of, or anything? I'm looking at the Blue Rock thing too. That's another family tradition we used to do out here, but
No, I just wanna wish everybody a Merry Christmas next week. Next Friday, today's Saturday. Next Friday is Christmas. And I want to wish everyone in the family and everyone a Merry Christmas. And I would like to encourage everyone to remember what Christmas really is.
I just want to say before we close, make sure you give it the hotna.
Well, I'm totally honored, Adam, to be part of this family, and I wish the best of luck for your mom and everyone else at this Christmas time.
You too, and we sure love you.
All right, Merry Christmas.
Hello, I'm Valerie Bond. First, I was born in March of '59, during a snowstorm. And then I have 4 kids. Dana is my oldest daughter. She is 40. Brandon is my oldest son. I think is 38. And then I have 2 younger kids, Alex, who is 27, and David, who is 25. And of course, one lives in Sacramento, one lives in Chicago, and 2 live in the Kearney area. I'm going to talk a little bit about growing up on the farm and some of the interesting food processing stories we have here. We butchered pigs in the basement on antique dining room table that is now in the dining room of the farm. And I remember that vividly because the smell and all the different parts that had to be saved for the pig that we used for different things, including the head. We used the pig head. And Grandma and my mom would take the pig head and clean it up really well, and then bake it in the oven to make this dish that's really gross, but it was called head cheese. And they seemed to love it. And what I remember about it the most is that my mom and Grandma used to say they used my dad's toothbrush to brush its teeth before it went in the oven, so the teeth would be nice and clean. My mom would chop up sauerkraut and put it in a big crock on the porch. So we had all kinds of interesting things fermenting, sauerkraut on the porch, and they would make sauerkraut made from cabbage in the crock. And they made wine using A&W bottles, like I think the rhubarb wine, maybe some other kinds, I don't really remember. My grandma liked to use a grinder to pull up roots. She pulled up roots of horseradish and ground them up in the kitchen using the grinder. And the smell of that horseradish would run everybody out of the house. And so she had the whole house to herself basically when she was grinding horseradish. We butchered at least 200 chickens every year. We raised them. Everybody had their job as soon as they were able to basically walk and talk. They had a job, whether it be singeing the hairs on it or dunking them in a tub or tying them up in freezer bags. We all did our part to help with that. And we always had a great big huge garden. It wasn't uncommon for us to can 100 quarts of beans and corn. And I think Grandma even canned meats such as chicken and beef. And we had freezer corn, and we had a whole house full of food by the time the end of the season was. So my memory is that we had really good work and good hard work, good food, and lots of love.
I'm Mark. I'm the second oldest. Val was first, and I was the first son born in 1961. I got married in 1980 and married Rita Zaleski from Lodgepole. And we had 2 sons. We had Adam and Jason. So remember in my life with my parents, we lived in a stone house it's about 9 miles north of Lodgepole. And the only thing I remember about that house is the inside of the house had big flowered wallpaper. And I remember playing in the dirt with metal trucks. And there was no lawn, it was just dirt. There was a white picket fence that went around the backyard. And like I said, I had metal trucks. It wasn't these plastic ones you buy today, but they were the good ones. So when I was really young, we moved to the place where my dad was talking about. The house was moved from Gurley, and I remember when we moved, we loaded all the furniture in the back of an old 1949 grain truck. And I was in the back of that truck, and as you went east from that place, there was a big steep hill. And as we went up that steep hill, all the furniture rolled back, clear to the back of the truck and hit the tailgate. And I was back there and I was terrified. But we finally got moved over to the new place, and I don't remember what year that was. It was probably 66, somewhere 65, 66, somewhere in there. And my dad and my grandpa Bartling was in the cab of the truck. Grandpa was helping us move. So when we were kids at the new place, we went to a country school just a few miles north of our small farm, and Mom would pack all our lunches and lunch boxes, and there were the old metal lunch boxes that are antiques now, and she'd take us to school, and she'd load us all up, and off we'd go to school. And school is a one-room building with a basement. We had recess, and you could play outside. We played Annie I over with the ball over the roof of the building. We played dodgeball, we played baseball, we played football. We even had a swing set and merry-go-round, and my dad was on school board of that school for, I think, as long as I was in there. And our life as kids was full of love from our parents, and somehow they kept track of 7 of us, and we were disciplined, and when we needed it, we got it. And church and Sunday school was always a must every Sunday. I remember my dad lining all us boys up before church and making sure that we were dressed appropriately and that he'd comb all of our hair, and everyone got a piece of gum to go to church. My mom lined the girls up, and she did the same. We had to act like someone in church. We had to respect our building and the Lord, and if we acted out in church, boy, when we got home, we got it. And there was a belt involved in the whole thing. There was respect taught for church. And that's the way it should be, respect the Lord and his building. So it molded us all it molded us for life. And we went through confirmation at the Lutheran church as well in Lodgepole. Anyway, we lived on a small farm north of Lodgepole, and my dad had his own little body shop, and he worked extremely hard day and night, fixing cars. The guy, as soon as we got home from church, he was at work, and he worked 7 days a week, and he worked late in the night, and later in life he got an auto body teaching job at the Votech College in Sydney. But he never charged enough for his work. He was always taking care of his customers, and he was respected by all of his customers. And I still hear that today from his old customers, how fair he was and how hard he worked and what a great job he did. And he farmed 4 quarters, spread out across the area for, well, I remember roading tractors and equipment from the home place clear over about 10 miles north of Sunol, where we had a quarter there that we farmed, and we had another quarter by the Wyerts Church, and he farmed a quarter just east for a while for his Aunt Katie, which eventually he quit doing, and just we had the 3. But so we had a few cows. He was always had laying hens and raised chickens and butchered for many years. We butchered chickens, and if I suppose I don't even know how many, but we had 2 batches a year. So we probably had about 200 chickens a year for I don't know how many years, but I'll bet there's 20,000 chickens that run through that place, and then also butchered for others for customers. And we used to get up, and mom would get up and she'd get breakfast going, and we'd go out and we'd get things going, and we'd have breakfast, and then we'd go out and start dressing chickens. And my mom was the gal that gutted the chickens, and she gutted almost all of them all those years. And she just stood there all day long and pulled the guts out of chickens, and it was great. We'd catch them and put them in crates, and then we'd take them out of the crates, and we'd scald them and take the feathers off. And we did have a chicken picker and that, but so we'd do 100 a day sometimes, and everybody was there. All of us kids were there, and everybody had their own job, and everybody did their own thing, and they knew what to do, and it was the regular production line. So when I was in high school, I decided I'd try raising some pigs, and as Dad did for a long time, and it was a failure for me due to the pigs got sick, and the market was terrible, and I had to run them all down and give them shots, and we had a winter that year that the shed blew full of snow, and we had to carry them across the yard. There's 27 of them, and my dad and I carried them across the yard in big snowbanks, and you'd go over one of the snowbanks and you'd fall clear to your chest in the snow, and he was just always there for me. And so was my mom. My mom was a great nurse. She was there 24 hours a day for all of us. And there was times when I remember when one time we all had chicken pox, and it seemed like we all had them at the same time, and she was just 24 hours a day for as long as it took to get over the chicken pox, and she was awesome as well. She's a great mother, a great person. My dad was always been my hero, and he still is. Mom always worked hard with all of us brats, cooking 3 meals a day, did all the dishes. Girls helped some, and we did too. I mean, we all had chores to do with dishes and stuff, and she cut all of our hair. I know she did all of us boys. I don't know if she did the girls or not. I don't remember that, but she cut our hair, and she never complained 1 minute ever. And I don't think we appreciated that as much as we should have when we were kids. Looking back now, she never got enough thanks for what she did for us, and neither did my dad. But she later took a job at the school cooking, and my boys were in school when she cooked. She started cooking the year after I graduated, so she was never there when I was there, but she'd go in early in the morning and she'd make homemade cinnamon rolls, and I mean, everything was pretty much homemade. And I remember when my boys were in school, she'd always put back the biggest cinnamon rolls for when they came through line. So I remember when we were in school at the country school, she was always sitting in the car waiting for us when we got out of school, and she'd bring us home, and she always had treats for us when we got home. It was either like cinnamon rolls, or it was a homemade sour cream chocolate cake, or cheese. She used to make cheese. We milked some cows, and she made cheese and butter, and she canned. And I mean, we always had a cave full of vegetables from the garden that she canned all summer, and we had pears and peaches and jelly and canned beef, and she worked so hard. When we were milking, Mom was always there milking too. Mom wasn't afraid to milk a cow. But we always had ice cream. She made ice cream and butter, and so it was a terrible time, terrible day when we lost her. She always had a huge garden. And she canned, like I said, she canned everything. She had tomatoes and green beans and corn, and you name it, it was in the cave for the winter. And she was a blessing to everyone. And the cave was always full for the winter, and she did a great job. And she never got tired. I never see her tired. She worked every day with all of us kids, and never saw her tired. She just kept going and kept going and kept going. I know she was, but she never showed it. But I had a great childhood. I can't thank my mom and dad enough for raising us the way they did, because they did it right. And if any of us have failed, which we have, it's definitely our own fault, not theirs. We always had harvest in the summer, and it was a big deal. We had wheat to harvest. And I remember we did oats and we did barley sometimes. And Dad was always so stressed out, worried about the crop. And he'd just get going as soon as the day break and got everything ready. He'd walk around the combines and the trucks, make sure everything was good. And boy, as soon as it was dry, we went and we did all our own harvesting for many years. And I remember Jason, my son, riding on the combine with me, and he would sit on that combine all day long. And we'd just sit there and cut wheat, and he was a trooper. He'd just sit there all day long, and harvest, was a big deal. Get the crop in, and always had breakdowns and frustrating times. It was always hot. It was in July, and hot and sweaty, and Mom, she'd make us all lunch, and she'd run it to the field for us, and no matter where we were, even if we were north of Snow, which is about 15 miles from the home place, here she'd come, and she'd have all these baskets full of food, and it was hot roast beef and mashed potatoes or fried chicken, or it was a big deal for her, and it was just amazing the work she went through to help us through harvest. Then she'd pick everything up, she'd go home, she'd clean up the mess and get ready for supper. And I really want to thank my parents for what they did again, because everything they did was right. I love my family. I wouldn't trade any of them for nothing. We had a great childhood, had great parents, and I could go on forever but we need to keep it kind of short. But I respect my parents very much. And again, my dad and my mom are my lifetime heroes.
I'm John, one of seven. I was born in 1962, November 27. I married July 31st of 1982 to Katie Thomas. And together we had 4 kids. Our oldest is Jeffrey. Second oldest is Ryan. Third is Joshua. And last but not least was my daughter, Emily. So I was asked to maybe share some thoughts and some memories of my past experience living on the farm. I was one of 7. I was the third oldest. Second oldest boy. I had an older brother, Mark, and an older sister, Valerie. Then 2 younger sisters, Chrissy and Julie, and 2 younger brothers, Matt and Robert. I got lots of great memories on the farm. Some that were funny and some that were not so funny. I chummed pretty close with my older brother, Mark. We were not too far along or too far apart. So we did a lot of stuff when we were real young together. And I remember all of the animals, all the things that we had at the farm, the cows, the chickens, the goats, the pigs, all of those things. I remember every year my mom would go out into the chicken house at night. We always had chickens. We had layer chickens, and then we had young chickens that we cooked for fryers. And the layers, after a year or so, some of them would quit laying eggs. So I remember my mom would go out after dark when the chickens would all be in the roost, and she would pull the chickens down from the roost, and she'd take 2 fingers and she'd lay them down around the lower part of the breastbone to see if the chicken had enough room to pass an egg. So she'd lay her 2 fingers down, and if her 2 fingers would fit in that cavity, then she would put them back on the roost, and they would continue to lay eggs. And if they would not, then she'd take them out of that pen and she'd put them over into another pen where they would become chicken soup. So I was out watching her do it one night. So the next day, I don't know, I wasn't very old, maybe 8, 9 years old. And I thought maybe she might have missed a few. So I went out into the chicken house and I caught me a couple chickens. And what I thought she was doing was sticking her finger up their bottoms and checking to see if there was an egg inside of there. So as I was examining these chickens are screaming and hollering, and my mom come out in the chicken house and she asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm checking to see if there's any eggs in these chickens. And she said, oh my God, John, that's not at all what I was doing. That's not what I was doing. And you need to go wash your hands. Those chickens that we would take and we would put them over into the fryer pins where they would turn into chicken soup. My mom would then butcher those chickens. Well, my brother Mark and we used to lay on top of the chicken house with our BB guns, and we'd shoot chickens. And boy, they'd flop around. I remember one time my brother Mark, he shot one, accidentally hit it in the head, killed the chickens. We had to drag it out in the stubble field so nobody would find it. And so one day my mom we were butchering those chickens that weren't layers anymore. And they were just clear full of BBs that Mark and I had shot. They had all these sores and BBs underneath the skin and these festers. And well, they couldn't even eat the chickens because Mark and I he was always. I remember one time my dad had a body shop on the farm, and he would put in windshields and stuff like that. And my brother Mark he had just assured me if we cut big pieces of cardboard out of those boxes, and if we would tape feathers on the box, and then he taped the wings on me and then got me up on top of the chicken house and had jump, and he assured me that I could fly. And I gained 0 altitude, ended up in a big ball on the bottom of the chicken house. And that was fun times for my brother Mark. I'm pretty sure he knew I couldn't fly to him. On the farm, we were wheat farmers, so we always had a crop of wheat, and you had a combine and a truck, and that wasn't really enough to get all of the wheat out of the field. My dad was always in a big hurry because in July big thunderstorms come and a hailstorm would take us out of business. So my dad had custom cutters, and for several years we used the same custom cutters, and they had a boy, and he was about my age. His name was Mark, and he chewed tobacco. We weren't very old. We were about 10 years old, and he chewed this red man, or it was beech nut chew in a pouch, and he'd chew that chew, and then he'd spit through his front teeth. And man, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So I wanted some of that beech nut. So I finally talked him, and he gave me the bottom of his bag, and there was just a little bit in there. And I knew I wasn't supposed to be chewing tobacco, so I went out down the tree row, and there was an old apple tree out in the back, and I used to climb that tree all the time. So I climbed up in that apple tree and got me a big old mouthful of that chew. Of course, he had no clue what I was doing. I chewed it like bubble gum and swallowed all the juice. And, oh man, I was so sick. It fell out of the apple tree. I puked my way all the way back up the house. My mom came out of the front, and I was up on the front steps. She was like, "Johnny, what's the matter with you, boy? I just came clean." I said, "I'm in the apple tree chewing tobacco, Mom." My mom's such a loving person. She just sat out there on the front step and rubbed my back while I puked for about an hour, getting rid of all that beech nut. Yeah, it was. There were good times on the farm, that's for sure. We had the hill, which was always a big event for us. I'm not sure. Out in one of our wheat fields, there was a vertical rise of maybe 15 feet. And it was like, we'd go to the hill, and it was like we were climbing a mountain, this little hill out there in the middle of the wheat field. And sometimes we'd pack lunches, and all of us kids would walk out to the hill and have a picnic out there on the hill. We all went to a little one-room country schoolhouse, Rush Creek Public Schools. All of us kids did. And I don't know, I think there was 12 people in the school, and 7 of them were Bartlings. They called it the Bartling School because everybody's either brother, sister, or cousin that went to school out there. But it was a great time, and it was a great experience, and a education. Just one more story about my brother Mark and I. Before I went to school, my brother Mark and I, we decided we were going to go rabbit. We were going to kill us some rabbits. My brother Mark had this great idea where you take these big flat limestone rocks, and we prop that rock up with a little stick, and then we put a carrot underneath that rock, and Mark was sure that a rabbit would come underneath that rock, and he would be so careless getting that carrot that he would bump that stick, and that stick would come out, and that big rock would fall on the rabbit, and it would kill the rabbit. So we had an old friend, Harold Isley, that helped my dad in the body shop, and I was telling Harold that we just got these traps out. So Harold, he went out, he looked at my traps, and Harold went to lunch, and he came back, and he had 3 or 4 big jackrabbits with a bullet hole in their head. So we went out there, and we laid those rabbits underneath those rocks and put a stick. Mark got off of school, and he was so happy. He killed all those rabbits. His plan just worked like a charm. So all in all, I had a great experience. I had the best mom and dad that a person could ever have. I lived in the greatest part of the world. And at the time, I didn't think it was so awesome. But today, when I look back at it, I realize how blessed I was.
I am Julie Koza, and I was born in November of 16th of 1964, and I'm child number 4. So I got to see a lot of different activities in the children ahead of me, good and bad. So I kind of modeled myself from not trying to be too bad from what I've seen ahead of me. I am most grateful for the family that I grew up with and the family that I have. And I am thankful for living on the farm all my childhood years and all the memories that we have acquired there. Of course, not all memories are good, but the ones that I remember are good. So anyway, one of my good memories that I have is the 4 younger one of us, Robert and Christina. and Matt and Bobby was probably pretty small. We would play store, and we would play. Someone would be the storekeeper, and my mom would keep all of our cans with labels on them, so we had a store. And someone was the mailman, and we used church envelopes for the mail. And then we had a library. So we went from place to place playing those different stores. And so in the wintertime, we played in the basement. And in the summertime, we played outside and rode our bikes. But I remember spending hours and hours doing that, and we never got tired of it. And I don't think that we had much fighting over it. Maybe we fought about who wanted to be the mailman, probably the most. I have another memory. My mom made a lot of dough, bread dough, cinnamon roll dough, whatever. Of course, everyone knows. And I would watch her a lot. I watched her what need that dough, and I always wanted to get my hands in it. And she never would let me touch the dough, but she would always roll all the excess dough off of her fingers, and then she would let me eat that. We have good memories of my mom making cheese. Of course, we had milk cows, and the cows were milked every day, and they had a separator in the basement, and we'd run the milk through the separator. We'd have cream, and we'd have milk, and we'd have butter. So my mom would make cheese quite often, and it had to lay out and dry for a while. I remember that, and then she'd melt it, and we would just eat that cheese as fast as she could make it. And then I know she started putting some caraway seeds in it, and it kind of deterred at least me from eating it. I know Mark said that he ate it anyway, him and Val. But I also have a memory of, what else? Of course, we did a lot of chicken picking, and I would watch the chickens right along with Chrissy, and my mom would do the gutting. And I was lucky because a lot of times I got to go in early and make dinner. And I would make dinner, and I always remember making a rhubarb cake, because we had rhubarb growing right out there, and I always came in and made a rhubarb cake for lunch. And no matter, even if we killed chickens that day, sometimes we still had chicken for lunch. It was kind of gross, but we did. And I guess that's all the memories I have thought about for right now, so I'll end there.
Hello, this is Matt in good old Kearney, Nebraska, and I have a wife named Tammy. Andrew just turned 15, and Sam is going to be 14, and Allison is going to turn 13 in September. And I am number 5 of the Magnificent 7, I guess. And so anyway, first thing I want to say is I always like telling the story about, it's kind of like a Christmas present you got when you're little, but it wasn't really for you, but it was probably the best gift you ever got. And I can remember when I was 4 years old, I was always following my dad around, and he was out in the shop, and I found him out there, and he called that Santa's workshop. And that's where he either made gifts for his kids or wrapped them. And later on, he said, each family gets one homemade gift. Well, anyway, I went out there and I opened the door and I seen him wrapping this present. And he was wrapping up this big old basketball goal. And he's using that, he always used that white shop paper they used to mask off cars and stuff with. And I opened up and he's wrapping this basketball goal. And I walked in the door and he says, promise me you won't tell Mark. And I was so excited, and I said, I sure won't. And I ran out there with a big smile on my face. And that basketball goal, even though that wasn't my present, I can't think of any other gift that gave me more enjoyment. in my childhood. And the next thing I would like to talk about is my first bicycle. Me, Julie, and Chrissy, we all learned how to ride a bike on this big green bike. We called it the Green Clunker. I think it was a bike that somehow we got from Jerry Gentry, but it was really hard for us to ride that bike. It was just so big and clumsy and awkward. We'd have one person have to stand it up and put the other one on, and we'd push it, and off we go. And we, there was a lot of spills and falls, and I kind of got tired of falling off that bike, and I thought, I need a bike of my own. So I had it in my mind, I wanted a bike with a kickstand. And I always told my dad, I said, I want a bike with a kickstand, because I guess I thought since I was so little that if I had that kickstand, I could get myself on there and ride the bike. So we went to some garage sales, and we'd find one, and I'd get on it, and didn't really want it because it didn't have a kickstand. And one day we went to this garage sale, and we found one with a kickstand, and I just propped it up. I got right on it, and I just drove right down the street, and I was so happy. I mean, this bike, it was rusty. The seat, it had no cover on the seats. And tires are flat. But man, I just rode all over with that bike. So my mom decided to buy it, and we took it home, and we got it home, and my dad, he put, I'm sure he probably put, 2 new tires and new rims, and it was all rusty. And he greased the chain and oiled everything up. And he says, now, Matt, the little boy that had this bicycle, he kept it outside. So you need to keep this inside. So then he went out out the old cars, and as a little kid, it just seemed like there was all kinds of cars out there. And I remember him, this big red 4-door Pontiac, and he went in the back seat and cut the vinyl off the back seat, and there was a seat cover, for my new bicycle seat, and he found some foam, he put it in there, and later my dad said, he says, I love cars. He says, and I gave this disease to all my boys. There's always a lot of cars around, and he could always find anything to repair or fix anything with, a lot of the stuff coming from those cars he had. And that was, he fixed up that old bicycle, and that was a great bike for me for a long time. And I don't really know whatever happened to that. But another thing that's in my mind that I'd like to talk about is the day we made the ice sled. Now, my dad was always really, really busy, but if you begged him enough, he'd take the time to do something that you really wanted to do. So it was like in the middle of July, and I had this idea I wanted an ice sled because I've always been a fishing nut, and we'd go ice fishing, and I'd see these people with all these sleds and stuff, and it was really handy because you keep everything inside them. So I had all decided exactly how I wanted it inside it, this spot for the tackle box, this spot for the lunch pail, this spot for the, camp stove, and lanterns and whatever else, you need to go fishing. So he found this sled runner. I imagine he probably went out to the, probably the iron pile, we call it, and found this sled runner. And then he had to find some plywood. And the neat thing about this is somehow we ended up with the picnic table from the old Rush Creek School. And all it was, or not the picnic, I mean the ping pong table. And all it was two sheets of plywood put together with hinges on sawhorses. They're all painted green and the white around the edge, and it looked good for a picnic table. But anyway, we sacrificed that plywood for the ice tent. And we've got it all fixed up and painted it white with a big red stripe, because he's never ever painted anything in his life didn't have a stripe on it. It had to have a stripe. So anyway, this was like the middle of July, and it was hot and it was sweaty, and I know I'd always ask him. I probably asked him several times. I said, "Do you think we're the only one making an ice sled today?" He said, "I'm sure we probably are," because there couldn't have been very many people thinking about ice fishing in the middle of summer like we were. And then I don't know if you ever remember, but the day of when we had his auction, this sale, here's this ice sled there, and it's going on the truck, going to Chapel, go to the sale. And so we get it down there, and I just kind of thought, boy, nobody's going to bid on this thing. So we got at the sale, and I wanted it because it was a memory, and I really liked that little thing. It was, I could have gotten it years ago and taken it back, but what am I going to store that big thing? I mean, it takes up a lot of room. So anyway, we started bidding on it. I was the only one that bid on it. It was like $10. And then here's this old man comes over there, and he goes talks to the auctioneer, and he says, somehow he says, I didn't know this. We're bidding on this. So the auctioneer said, would it be okay with you if we start the bidding on again? And I said, yeah, that's fine with me. I said, I was thinking he'll probably bid $5 and I'll get it for 20. So here it was, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Like that old man just wouldn't put bidding on it. And it would bid all the way up to $95. And I let him have it. And I told my brother Mark, and I told the auctioneer, I said, if I was in charge of this sale, I said, I would have threw that thing the whole night and bring it down here. And the auctioneer told me, he says, you just don't ever know. But for some reason, I think that old man knew how important that old ice sled was. But so anyway, that's pretty much all I've got for today.
Okay, my birthday is September 14th, 1968, and I have two children, Callie McKenna and Cole Doran Bush. One memory that I would like to talk about is when we went to Canada. My dad worked really hard, like he always does, and got a brand new Suburban, 1976 Suburban, I think, and it was orange and brown, I think. And he gave us each a roll of quarters for the trip. And these Suburbans are rare now because there's the three seats where 3 people could sit in each one. So it held 9. That's just how many we needed. And so, because we always fought in the car, my dad put up 7 $1 bills on the visor so that if one of us was naughty, then our dollar bill got taken down. So then we wouldn't get that dollar bill for Canada. So it was just a really fun trip. I remember stopping in, I think, Idaho one night. And we spent the night in these little houses or whatever. And of course, my mom was always ever prepared with everything. And she always made sure that we all had food and all that business. I remember the worst thing about the trip is that I missed my kitty cat so much. And I couldn't wait to get home to see my kitty cats. But it was a fun trip. The worst part of the trip also was the ferry ride because it was really scary for me. I don't know why. Maybe I watched Titanic too many times. But I was only 6. And I just remember that the ferry ride was really scary. Another thing that I remember, and probably everyone's going to talk about this, it's not about the plucking of the pigs, it's the plucking of the chickens. And I don't remember the pig story, but I do remember doing a lot of chickens, and we would catch them out of the pen and hang them upside down and chop their heads off. And then usually my job was to soak them in the hot water so their feathers came off. Or a lot of times I had to clean the gizzards, and that was the worst part because that was really gross because then we had to look at what the chickens ate. And it was usually like rocks and stuff and pieces of glass. I remember that we always had a big garden, and my dad and my mom always worked really hard in the garden, plowing and making the little rows straight and irrigating. And then we had to pick the weeds and pick the beans forever, and then can the beans forever and all that stuff. And I'm talking fast, and it's not going to last 10 minutes. But I also remember going to the mountains. That was a really big thing for my mom and dad and us, is that we always wanted to go to the mountains. Glen Echo usually. And we stayed in the rustic cabins, which meant that you had to go outside to the bathroom. It was always cool to get a cabin because it was always next to the river so that we just could hear the river all the time. I'm pretty sure I was the only one that caught the most fish is because I'd make everybody take the fish off the hook for me. And so then I had more time to fish. We just had a lot of fun memories, and we played a lot of games with my dad. anytime he wasn't working, he was spending time with us, but he always worked really hard. And so I think that's all.
Yeah, I'm Robert. I'm the youngest. They call me Bobby, most of them, I guess. I was born in 1972, and my wife's Carrie, and my oldest son, Jacob, and he was born in 1996. Nathan was born in 1999, and Hannah was born in 2002. I don't know where to start with memories, I guess. I have so many. The first thing I always think about when I think about memories is working with Grandpa in the shop, in his old shop, and he's doing body work, and I just hang out with him in there and watching him use all of his tools, most of them he made himself. I was just amazed at how he could make those cars look brand new. I was always excited just to hang out with him, and when I got a little older, he still let me help him a little bit. But that, I remember helping on the farm. It was a really good experience. We get to learn hard work and go out, and we always didn't have the best equipment, but we always made it work. And chickens was always a big deal. I always had to take care of the chickens and feed them before school and after school, and we'd dress chickens. That was the day I hated the most, but it turned out to be one of the best memories and most fulfilling experiences. How efficient our chicken crew was. So we could dress 100 chickens before noon and watch the crew get smaller and smaller over the years, and eventually, at one point, me and my mom ended up doing it. Grandpa had summer school one summer, and my mom and myself were the only two, and he got home in time to help us bag them. But that was an experience. Getting ready for harvest, that was always a big deal. You have to get all the equipment out and work on it for a week or two before it was time to harvest. Everything had to get ready, and I remember learning how to change oil on those old trucks, 1949 truck, and we had a 48, and I learned how to change oil on those. I was probably 10, 12 years old, but I remember learning to drive on my dad's 1960 Ford pickup. It was kind of a pile of junk, but if you could drive that clutch, you could drive anything, because you just really had to hammer on the gas once it started moving. It was tough to learn how to drive on some of that stuff, but I remember driving country roads, and I was way too young to drive, and it was just a great place to grow up, and a great place to live. I remember going fishing. If we go fishing, that was the greatest thing. We didn't get to fish much because Dad was always working, but when we did, that was the greatest thing. And we did more fishing in the winter than we did in the summer. And that ice fishing, we had a lot of success up at Island Lake, and that was one of the best memories I have as well. I haven't been able to recreate that at all. I haven't had any luck ice fishing since those days. But that, and I guess being the youngest, I had to watch every kid grow up and move away, and how hard that was on Mom. That's a really strong memory for me. Every time a kid would move away, she'd be sad, and I hated that. But